who are joining us via the live stream, we have some fantastic videos to share from the Centers of Excellence that you've been hearing about. And we'll learn even more from them later this afternoon, along with some great conversations that we have about the implications of the PTFI. So we will be back with our live programming at 1:30 p.m. today, so enjoy those videos. For everyone who is staying with us in the room, we're going to take a quick break for lunch. I want to thank our friends at Great Performances, including Liz Newmark, Kevin Yeager, and Gary Bettigan, for the amazing meal that they have prepared. They and their team have been incredible to work with.
PTFI brings to the table standardized protocols. It brings to the table a network of centers of excellence around the world, in which we're all trying to focus on the same issues that are now part of what our humanity is trying to solve. Eventually, our main interest is not only food security, food production, sustainable food production, but also health, human health, and also try to engage in the more systematic efforts that we need to address as humanity in our lifetime.
Entender la calidad y composición de los alimentos es importante para la salud humana y del planeta, dada la relación que existe entre la dieta, entendida como una exposición que puede ser positiva o negativa, de acuerdo con las características químicas, moleculares y nutricionales de los alimentos, y las enfermedades más prevalentes que afectan a la humanidad en todo el mundo, entre estas el cáncer, la diabetes y las enfermedades cardiovasculares.
Los protocolos que nos ha proporcionado el PTFI para este tipo de estudios nos sirven a nosotros de una herramienta, como una herramienta estandarizada para poder caracterizar los alimentos, saber básicamente qué es lo que estamos comiendo y cuál es, por supuesto, su composición nutricional.
Right now, we are analyzing tropical fruits from the Colombian Pacific region, and we are collecting these foods from local markets like Alameda here in Cali. Also, we are analyzing the nutritional composition of 50 accessions of beans from the Future Seeds Gene Bank at the Alliance Biodiversity and SEAT.
For me, in a nutshell, the Periodic Table of Food Initiative is just that, by analogy to the chemical periodic table of elements, as powerful as it could be in terms of thinking towards the future, about health, about environmental impact, about energy sources from organisms, about the use of food as medicine, and so forth. So I think it's a powerful concept that's coming behind the Periodic Table of Food Initiative.
Me entusiasma participar en la tabla periódica de los alimentos por varias razones, empezando por la oportunidad de innovación, al aplicar diferentes instrumentos dentro del área de la alimentómica para generar conocimiento sobre la composición de los alimentos. Información es poder. La composición alimentaria y la información que se abrirá a través de esta colaboración nos dará entonces las armas para poder tomar las mejores decisiones, garantizando la salud del individuo, pero además siempre en reflexión de lo que esto implica para la salud de nuestro planeta.
También me entusiasma el hecho de que podamos participar en esta red, que es una red internacional, en la cual pues vamos a poder acceder no solamente a nuestra base de datos, sino también a la base de datos de alimentos de otros países.
Con ello lograríamos reorientar el consumo de ciertos alimentos a través de este mejor conocimiento de ellos y, por supuesto, promover una salud planetaria.
En México pues se va a analizar la chía, el amaranto, la guayaba, la tortilla de nixtamal, el mango, que son alimentos de mucho consumo de nuestro país y que además son muy característicos. Son alimentos que, por ser naturales, por ser frescos, tienen una serie de características, tienen una calidad nutrimental elevada, cada uno en su área, y claro, la calidad nutrimental va a depender también de la magnitud del consumo de cada uno de estos alimentos.
El amaranto es un pseudo cereal de origen mexicano. Sin embargo, ha sido eclipsado por otros cereales como por ejemplo el trigo. Al estudiarlo y al compartir el conocimiento que nosotros obtengamos de este cereal, esperamos traerlo de regreso a la mesa del mexicano, para en esa forma hacer una biodiversidad dietaria en la dieta de nuestro país y de esa manera impactar de forma benéfica la salud del planeta.
Creo que el mejor conocimiento de la composición fina de todos estos alimentos nos va a permitir acortar brechas de conocimiento y con ello hacer propuestas para desarrollo de nuevas formas de alimentación y por supuesto con impacto en medidas de política pública y recomendaciones para la población.
A través de este conocimiento se abrirán las puertas para poder encontrar soluciones y estrategias que sean eficaces para mejorar la salud de nuestra población y con ella la salud planetaria.
It's been decades since there's been transformative innovation in the food system, which has led to a human and planetary health crisis.
Growing our food is destroying the environment that we live in. And perhaps even worse, the diets that we consume are compromising our health and our quality of life. This is simply not sustainable by any criteria. The entire system has to be revolutionized, and we can't do that unless we know what it is that food is made of.
Often, efforts in the food system are siloed to either understand sustainability of production practices or health impacts of products separately. Through the PTFI methodologies, we are building a direct connection between production practices and health outcomes for our favorite foods.
We need to understand diet in very molecular and mechanistic terms, not as individual ingredients, but as an ensemble. Up until recently, that's not been possible to imagine because there were no tools to measure foods comprehensively. In order to be able to look at the complexity of diet and the complexity of outcomes, you have to be able to measure all the things in food as we consume them, and then how does that affect our outcomes?
In the early 20th century, a molecular understanding of vitamins and minerals led to the eradication of some of the most devastating diseases around the world: scurvy, night blindness, rickets, and many more. That was only 1% of the food. Imagine what would be possible if we had a molecular understanding of the other 99%.
The big research questions that we hope to address under the PTFI is, here in Australia we have some quite extreme environments. We have tropical systems, subtropical, dry tropics, we have arid conditions, Mediterranean systems and alpine systems. So one of the key questions is, how does the nutritional profile of foods change as they grow under different conditions? And what's the optimal nutritional profile compared to the growth conditions?
It's bridging and bringing the two worlds together of Western science and the ancient traditional sciences to be able to, I think, realise the potential that we have not only to care for country, but through caring for country practices, we also can value our plants that provide, and sustain us for our health and well-being into the future for the many generations.
Being able to use these protocols to develop methods where we can have a more sensitive way to find things that we don't know are present in these foods would be really exciting. There's lots of metabolites that we're really very interested in, things like anti-inflammatories, flavonoids, again, very important for health and the properties of nutrition, and being able to develop things like these new methods for detecting unknown metabolites is going to be really exciting.
It's really important that there's a co-creation process, an opportunity for Indigenous players and also Indigenous communities. Historically, this hasn't been the case, and there's a real opportunity with the Periodic Table of Food project to actually do it right. The Periodic Table of Food project really gives us an opportunity to understand in much more detail many of our native foods. Here in Australia, we have a real opportunity to hero the native foods. Things like kangaroo, things like kakadu plum, the desert limes, munchies. It's a really exciting project. It seems amazing that we don't currently have that data for many of the species that we consume on a daily basis. So the opportunity is really to provide this global database that can be used for nutrition and health benefits around the world.
Some of the big questions we are asking here at the PTFI Center of the South Pacific is, what is in our food and how can it benefit us? What biochemicals are present in our foods and how are they beneficial to human health and planetary health?
There has been a list of foods generated, scoping in progress on identifying the indigenous foods present here in Fiji, not only in Fiji and also in the Pacific region.
These includes coconuts, different fruits, different leafy vegetables from the Pacific Islands.
One in particular is kava, that we hold dear to our heart because it has a lot of importance in terms of our cultural background. It connects us to our indigenous identity.
As an indigenous person in Fiji, I'm also excited about learning more about the food that we consume on a daily basis, particularly the foods that are endemic to Fiji, and learning more about its molecular composition and some of the nutritional content that we are unaware of.
Looking into this indigenous native food would be something that this particular initiative will be looking into, which is hardly known to the world at the moment. What are some of the quality and the importance in terms of nutritional value of some of our own food? That would actually boost its priority in terms of how it's seen, and we also promote the conservation of our own indigenous trees and plants and biodiversity.
We're very excited to participate in the PTFI initiative as a center of excellence from the South Pacific. Understanding the composition of food will unlock information that can help have better health outcomes for communities in Pacific Island countries as well as globally.
What really excites me about the PTFI and our Center of Excellence is the opportunity to know the composition of the many foods that are neglected in Ghana and in the West African sub-region. We have so many indigenous food crops. We know and we feel that they are healthy, but really we don't have proof of these because they are quite neglected and very little work has been done on what is in them.
We have a selection of crops that we are very interested in analyzing using the PTFI methodologies. These include Bambara groundnuts, taro, African yam bean, African eggplant, finger millet, and a few others. Some of these crops we have focused on because they are neglected and underutilized, but they have shown real promise as food security crops.
We want to look at the impact of the soil health on the quality of the food. We are investigating the soil quality and then the food composition and then the human health and the linkage between these.
Understanding food quality and food composition is so essential for human and planetary health. It helps people make the right choices for foods that will promote their nutrient intake and their health. Knowing the composition, knowing food quality really helps you also to choose options to grow food that will not have a negative impact on the environment. So we need food systems that are environmentally sustainable, economically sustainable, and also socially sustainable. The PTFI work that we are doing is really a prelude to making food-based dietary guidelines that are fit for purpose for the country, and then conducting your national food consumption studies. And this really excites me.
In food, the components are very diverse. Over thousands of molecules are available, and PTFI is striving towards addressing these components. So we believe that addressing all or majority of the food components in the food, according to the PTFI, they call it the dark matter, which is the unknown components, are very wide. So addressing these will help us to link these with nutrition as well as health. Ethiopia is endowed with huge agrobiodiversity. On the other hand, the nation is challenged with a high level of food and nutrition insecurity and malnutrition in different forms. So we gave emphasis in our research to valorize underutilized crops to contribute to the food and nutrition insecurity that we are facing.
We are looking forward to different foods, as Ethiopia is one of the traditional foods, and those food could have an important molecular component for human being. So we are analyzing various kinds of foods, including at omics levels and at the molecular level.
So under this initiative, we are highly interested to work on different indigenous resources. For instance, we are considering teff, which is a staple food of Ethiopians. And the other crop of interest is barley, where Ethiopia is very well known as a center of diversity. Providing emphasis to the underutilized food crops is highly indispensable. Understanding food quality and composition has multiple advantages for human and planetary health. It will help us to provide appropriate interventions or advice for food security and nutrition policies, programs, and intervention. Moreover, it will help us to promote the production of diversified food crops that will help us, the community, to serve a nutritious and healthy diet.
PTFI addresses something we as nutrition scientists really need. We need to know what is inside our food because we need to know what people eat. We cannot say anything about potential health effect unless we know what people are eating. And it's surprising me that we are now in the 21st century and don't even know exactly what is in our food.
Being able to understand which foods deliver which nutrients, which food deliver or contain which metabolites, and so that we can be able to advise the future consumer as to which sources of nutrients would be possible from maybe a more diverse diet than is available at the moment. And I think that what we're trying to do is to come up with more sustainable solutions for a more diverse diet, not just for people within the Netherlands, but right across the world. And again, that's exactly fitting with what the PTFI is trying to do. Literally bringing people from all over the world and all the different continents of the world together to work on a common goal, and that is to deliver a food database which can be used by everybody. And I think one of the key goals which we have within the project is to use the massive amount of data that we're going to generate within PTFI to help solve one of the big challenges that we are faced with in this area of science, and that is that we can detect many different molecules in the food we eat, but we can't actually identify what these compounds actually are. This is what's referred to in PTFI as the dark matter of food, and I think this is a key challenge for us, is to try and reduce the size of that dark matter.
We are going to measure several foods, and the first, it's a special project, is going to involve plant-based meat replacers. We are working more and more thinking about sustainable diets, so not only healthy but also sustainable from planetary health point of view, environmental point of view. And then of course we need to make choices, reducing animal products maybe, taking up more plant-based products, but then we need to know what's inside them, also to make, let's say, recommendations to the general public.
I'm actually extremely enthusiastic about PTFI because I think it's the kind of project that Wageningen has to be involved with. If you think about our current mission in Wageningen, it's to explore the potential of nature, to improve the quality of life, and basically that's exactly the remit for the PTFI project as well.
Food is something that we eat every day, so it is worthwhile to know that what actually we eat in the day is not only the macro and micronutrients, but they are also composed of the biomolecules that could expose or consist of medicinal or functional properties. So therefore, being part of PTFI, I believe that we can discover the new compounds or even a compound that naturally occurring that would have beneficial properties to human health.
Underrepresentation of underutilized agrobiodiversity in food composition data globally is a huge impediment to understanding the nutritional and functional contributions of these foods to population nutrition and ecological health. Southeast Asia is extremely biodiverse. It's well known for its diversity of rice varieties, tropical fruits, spices, many unique indigenous foods. So at the moment, we're collecting and analyzing fruits, leaves, flowers, roots, rhizomes, shoots, stems, bulbs from all over Thailand.
We have been collected more than 200 samples of food. Most of them are cultural, environmental, and also health importance. Together with PTFI, I believe that I can use the tool that available support by PTFI like LCMS metabolomics tool to explore those metabolome inside that food and also share our ingredient, our food composition in the database to let people know what exactly inside Thai cuisines that we'll be so excited to explore.
It's a huge step forward to collecting much more extensive dietary information from populations, raising awareness and understanding of indigenous foods, generating observational and experimental evidence, and applying this evidence to help answer some really very important questions pertinent to human health and planetary health.
There is an opportunity for us to work together collectively as the global efforts, and there is an opportunity to look at what actually in the food and the opportunity to improve our planet and human health.
Hi everyone and welcome. In today's conversation, we are going to look at the periodic table of food initiative and the future of food systems. I am so excited to introduce our panelists joining me for this conversation. We have Jessica Fanzo, a professor of climate and director of the Food for Humanity Initiative at Columbia Climate School and a very longtime friend of Food Tank. So nice to see you, Jess. I'd like to welcome Anna Herforth, a senior research associate at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, who sits on the Periodic Table of Food Initiative's Scientific Advisory Committee. We also have Gary Paul Navhan, somebody I've admired a lot of my career. He is a writer, ethnobiologist, and research social scientist emeritus at the University of Arizona. He's also the co-founder of Native Seeds Search. We have Andy Jarvis, who is the director of Future of Food at the Bezos Earth Fund. He also initiated the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. So thank you for that, Andy. And we have Jonathan Lundgren, who is the founder and director of the Ecdysis Foundation. And Jonathan, did I pronounce that correctly?
You nailed it. That doesn't happen every time. So nice work.
I'm so excited to talk to all of you, and thank you for that. So Andy, I'm going to just start with you if that's okay. I'm hoping that you can explain why the PTFI and why diverse diets are so important for different communities. So first answer, why have this initiative? Why start it? And then why is it so important for diverse diets?
Well, first of all, just to say, thanks for the flattery of initiating the PTFI. I can't claim to having been the one that initiated the PTFI, but I jumped on it very quickly as soon as I saw that this was a great idea and helped along with a lot of other people to get the PTFI moving. And I just think it's so compelling. I mean, for me, there's a very good scientific reason why we need PTFI. Right. The fact of the matter is we're eating stuff and we have no idea what's in it. And it's quite shocking. You'd assume that, after thousands of years of kind of evolving human diet, and with all of the food science and all of the kind of the research out there over the past 100 years, we know what's in the food that we stick in our mouths and we don't. Right. So, first of all, I just think that, scientifically, honestly, how can we better manage our health? How can we drive the food system for sustainability, for nutrition, for all of these things if we don't actually understand the ultimate building blocks? What are the building blocks of the food that we're sticking in our mouths every day? So, that's the first thing. I think there's a super compelling, scientific argument, for filling these gaps. Sure. And then using that needs to inform how we drive forward the architecture of our food system in the 21st century to pull us back into planetary boundaries and pull us back into human health boundaries. I mean,
Yeah.
frankly, the food system is doing no favors whatsoever to neither people nor planet at the moment in the current configuration. And I think PTFI is just a fundamental, a base upon which we can design, we can have, the evidence to inform the direction we need to take.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's very common sense. It's very needed. It's filling all those gaps. And it is surprising to me that we have not sort of figured this out, that we're just at the beginning of finding out what's in our food. And so, Anna, if I can turn to you, Andy said that, we're eating stuff that we have no idea what's in it. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how we've come to understand what different diets look like around the world, because a lot of people understand what they're eating. They just don't know everything that's in it.
It's definitely layers of information that we're missing and just starting to scratch the surface to get. So Andy talked about the layer of what's actually in the foods and the building blocks of on a molecular level, on a chemical level, what's in the foods and how's it affecting our health. And there's so much to discover there. That's, a multiple centuries agenda, I really think. And, we're starting to move quickly on that with the PTFI, which is fantastic. But then there's also the fundamental question of what do people around the world actually eat? And amazingly, there has not ever been a global survey of what people eat until now. So we've just done the first ever global survey of what people eat around the world, which is a remarkable sentence in 2024.
It is really remarkable.
You would think that we already had this. And the fact is, it's been estimated what people eat through different data sources like food supply, like household expenditures. But at the individual level, what exactly are people eating and how is their diet quality characterized in terms of, are they getting enough dietary diversity? Are they eating too much of sugary foods or salty foods or other foods that are associated with health risks and risks of non-communicable diseases? This has really been done just for the first time by the Global Diet Quality Project. Now you can actually, the data is totally publicly accessible. It's the first time that anyone can go and choose a country and see what is being consumed in that country at dietquality.org.
Yeah.
That's where the data is available, and it's there for 85 countries now, which is 85%, represents 85% of the world population.
So that's dietquality.org, and everyone can go there and find that information. Anna, I want to continue with you for a moment because I went to a school of nutrition, science, and policy at a university in Boston. And
we went to the same school of nutrition, science, and policy.
And so if we didn't know this sort of information before, that's kind of astounding to me because I took, as part of my program, a lot of nutrition courses, obviously. So this is now more needed than ever because dietary quality has declined so rapidly. We're seeing the health effects of that all over the planet right now. But what were nutritionists sort of doing before this?
That is such a great question because it was sort of what I was asking when I came kind of from the field of ethnobotany and reading a lot of things by Gary and other people who have written about diversity of what people eat in different cultures. And entering the field of nutrition as a student, I was struck by where's the food? We're understanding nutrients, we're understanding infant and young child feeding practices, super important, right? We're understanding food security and access to food. We're understanding health and disease risks, but what about what people eat? There was nowhere, I thought I was missing something, like where's the data on what people eat? So again, it was estimated, but as an actual current survey, it just hadn't been there.
So these tools that the PTFI is creating are so valuable and so needed. And again, very revolutionary. And sort of finally catching up to the times that we're in, which I think is exciting. Gary, if I can come to you because, Anna and so many of us on this call admire the work that you have been doing for so long on ethnobotany. And you have said that some foods, including desert plants and herbs and other foods, have been very underrepresented in diets. And I'm wondering if you can talk about why these foods have been overlooked and ignored and not invested in the way that, you know, some other foods and crops and commodities have been invested in.
Well, thank you for that question, and it's great to be with the other food tankers here. I have to say that our primary research institutions have largely been in temperate areas, and the traditional processing techniques from desert areas are often very different than what are in temperate and tropical areas. So we have two issues there. That up until now, and that's why I love this project, we've sort of undersampled desert wild plants and herbs and spices that now we realize are going to be incredibly important because of the antioxidant content. So we're looking at a wider set of nutrients. And second of all, we can really look at the difference between raw fruits or seeds and how people are traditionally processing them by adding ash or adding other elements, spices that attenuate and enhance the food quality. So there's two things going on there, but we also now have this problem that by the time all of us die, at least 2/5 of the world's land surface is going to be arid adapted. We know that there's going to be about a 500-mile shift in southward, or excuse me, northward, in the optimum growing areas for a lot of the food. So people as far north as LA and Santa Barbara are going to have to begin to grow the things that we see in northern Mexico and Mexicali and Yuma, Arizona. And they're going to deal with kind of water scarcity that desert people have all along. But even worse than that, farm workers in those desert areas are already hitting the wall. Within the last decade, 4 times the number of deaths as a decade ago from heat stress, and 30,000 additional American farm workers killed last year in the fields from heat stress than any other year in history. So we need to really pay attention what the most needy in our food system, the farm workers, require to even work and bring us our daily bread.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought up the issue of workers and labor. We forget about that often when we're talking about food, all of the hands that are necessary to get that food on our plates. And those people need our respect, our honor. They need investment, and they need better pay and you know, a lot of other things that we can probably get into later. Just because Gary brought up these sort of climate changes that are happening, they're happening in real time. We're no longer sort of forecasting. We're experiencing the climate crisis every day. I'm wondering if you can talk about why it's important to understand what's in our food to protect biodiversity. Why is that important? Why is it important to understand what's in our food and how we can link it to protecting biodiversity? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Danny, for having me. I think this is such a great group because, like, Gary has focused so long on diverse seed systems, diverse plants and animals. You know, Anna's been leading the global dietary quality work to understand what people eat, and now the periodic food table initiative of what that diversity of those foods is composed of. So it's a really sort of nice lineage through the whole food system. And I think, as Gary had brought up, we are really facing a massive climate crisis. You know, it's not only longer term climate change, but climate variability, extreme events that are significantly impacting our ability to grow food, different kinds of food at different latitudes. And having and protecting that biodiversity is going to be really, really important, just like diversifying our investment portfolios, you know, improving the climate resilience, the nutrition resilience of these crops, potentially livelihood resilience of different crops. So the more we can safeguard or restore biodiversity, we're putting ourselves in a better position,
Right.
that diversity offers protection. So, there's a lot of focus, interestingly now, even though all of these people on this call, including in Andy's former job when he was at CIAT in Colombia, have been working on this issue of biodiversity or agrobiodiversity. I feel now is a moment where the world is starting to pay attention to biodiversity.
Yeah.
We're seeing the vision of adapted crops and soils by the State Department and Africa Union focusing on some of these indigenous crops that have been so important for Africa for so long, but have been undermined. So I feel we're coming to a moment where we're starting to understand that we need to diversify if we want to be able to feed the world and the planet. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you bring up so many points that I think are important, but one that you mentioned is this idea of livelihood resilience. And I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the broader structures that we need to have in place to address the power imbalances that are preventing people from having diverse diets. It's not just about knowing what's in their food, but having diverse diets at all.
You always ask me this question, Danny.
Because you answer it so well.
I mean, the power imbalances in the global food system and every system that food systems interact with is incredibly daunting. I really feel this is sort of the elephant in the room that we don't have a lot of solutions for of how we deal with the power imbalances and the consolidation and concentration of companies across the entire food supply. And it's concerning. And I teach students every day, and we debate this issue of how do we deal with this. And I think it's complex, and I don't have answers to it. I think governments need to step up. I think governments need to start paying attention to their food systems. They need to start regulating. They need to start incentivizing. Our governments are very laissez-faire. Their hands are off the wheel when it comes time to governing food systems. I mean, some work that Anna and I have been doing is trying to create more accountability by monitoring the performance of food systems so governments can start understanding the state of their food systems and where there's potential challenges. So for us as a researcher, and I can't speak for Anna, but I'm going to, we do believe in providing the best data that's the most accessible data for governments.
Right.
So they understand who's working in their food system, who's being left behind, how are their food systems performing for health, environment, climate, livelihoods, equity, and giving policymakers that data so they are not navigating in the dark when it comes time to decision making.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anna, do you want to comment on that? You're nodding profusely. So I just want to make sure you have a chance so you can speak for yourself instead of Jess Fanzo speaking for you.
The nodding was assuring Jess that I was definitely agreeing with what she was saying. But yeah, the incredible work that Jess has been leading with other collaborators at GAIN and other institutions on the food systems dashboard is exactly, as Jess was saying, trying to elevate this issue with data. Everyone talks about evidence base, and that's part of it, but also just having awareness by, having data available on these different pieces of food systems to highlight challenges that maybe have been overlooked or invisible, maybe because of lack of data, maybe because of lack of commitment, but having the data there makes it easy to start the conversation.
Thank you. Jonathan,
can I jump in there? I'm
Andy.
sorry, and I don't want to get between you and Jonathan here, but I think the data thing though is really interesting. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy right now. I mean, the data says that more farmers rely on maize across the planet, and more people eat wheat, maize, rice, basically than anything else. So the data says invest in that because that's the most important in our food system. And I think, the paradigm shift is not actually looking at, well, where is the most amount of money or the most amount of, calories or whatever coming from right now, but where are the white spaces? Where's the black? Where do we not know? So it's if anything, it's like, these dashboards should be like, illuminating the black, illuminating the gaps, and making a point that, look, if we don't invest in this, this will never shine. This will never come through. And I think that's one of the critical things that we got to kind of overcome, not priority set based on the current system.
Yeah, if we want true transformation, that paradigm shift has to happen. Jonathan, one thing, that I think governments and many of us, who are watching today have sort of not thought of or actively ignored is the role of soil health. And can you talk, you're leading a project through PTFI on regenerative agriculture. And I'm wondering if you can talk about why soil health is so important when we're thinking about the compounds and nutritional quality of the foods that we eat.
Well, when Andy was just saying the black areas that we really need to be focusing on, that often is the farming communities themselves and the ones that are kind of on the front lines and are inventing systems that can produce nutritious food in ways that help to solve planetary scale problems like climate change and desertification and other elements that we've been hearing about today. And what's been so exciting and gives me so much hope is that the farmers are doing that. We're able to, through science, validate and elevate what these farmers are showing us is possible, that oftentimes prior to amending how we're conducting scientific research, science said couldn't be done on their farms. And so that's really exciting. One of the outcomes of regenerative agriculture that gets me really excited is this whole concept of it. Yes, it's supposed to help the environment, help increase the resilience of rural communities, but it's also supposed to improve the nutrition of the food that we're eating.
Right.
But how do you measure that? And until what I view as sort of like the iPhone of the nutritional world has kind of come in with PTFI to give us this platform that we can build as a scaffolding for answering so many other questions. I mean, yeah, what an exciting moment. So soil health is absolutely inherent in this dialogue of nutrition. Much of the nutrition that we get comes from the soil under our feet.
And it is so hopeful. And I'm glad you brought that up because, Gary, if I can come back to you, your work over the years has given me so much hope personally, and so many of us who study these issues. And I'm wondering, one of the things that I have found when we're talking about, these areas that need more investment is that, if we go forward by going back and recognizing the people, practices, and foods that sustained indigenous communities for so long that have now turned into, what we call regenerative agriculture practices, those are the foods of the future. Those are the resilient foods. So those desert foods that are full of nutrients and resilient to pests and disease and heat stress. Can you talk more about sort of why it's important to recognize not just the foods, but the people behind them?
Well, let's bridge what Jonathan just said with kind of your question in a way that the indigenous farmers, and I have to say the Arab farmers that I've worked with in my family's homeland in Lebanon and Syria, are really using what now we're calling in USDA climate hubs novel agroecosystems to grow their food. And I think anyone who studied any food history or ethnobotany knows that they're not novel in the sense that they're brand new, but we're dusting them off again. And that agroforestry in particular is one of those things that our colleagues have shown that just in the US desert border states, we have about 2,000 people who are doing agroforestry that didn't call themselves Hopi farmers and Navajo farmers, and many that you've had at other food tank symposium gatherings as speakers. And so what we're seeing is that the kinds of focus that Andy has on legumes can extend into tree legumes that also sequester carbon and provide shade for the annual crops in alleys between the rows of tree crops. So all those agroecosystems that Jonathan's farmers are now bringing into broader recognition and support are around us, but hidden from us, just like some of the nutrients that we need have been hidden by the last century of biases in what we look at. And I think we're going to see a lot more interest in those novel agroecosystems that are on the margins now and see them mainstream because they are sequestering more carbon, but they're also building the kind of soil features and microbial communities that Jonathan's talking about. So we want to put the culture back in agriculture and the people and their livelihoods back into the focus. And in the Southwest alone, we have people from refugees from 34 different countries working as farm workers. And we need more and more farm worker to farmer programs to help these people get land to teach the rest of us how to farm under the challenging conditions we're now facing.
Absolutely. Putting the culture back in agriculture and putting people first, I think, is so important. Andy, Gary brought up your interest in legumes, but I want to talk about this issue of consumption. Getting people to change what they eat, to eat differently, is not easy. And you have said that this highlights why it's so important to provide choices that are sustainable and to get the architecture of the food system right. So can you talk about what that architecture means to you? What is it? You're on mute.
There we go. There we go. No, I mean, no one likes their diet shifting. You know, if someone comes to you, you know, in the street and says, "Hey, I'm going to shift your diet," you know, you're like, "What?
Leave me alone.
Shift my diet? Yeah, leave me alone." You know, I think, you know, the concept of shifting people's diets is just not the way to go. I think, you know, the concept needs to be is having choice in supermarkets, in markets, you know, wherever it is that you're getting your food or you're growing your food, you know, it's having sustainable choice, and then consumers make the choices that they have every right to make. I mean, the thing right now with the architecture of the food system is everything is against some of the more sustainable choices, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it all starts with government subsidies. You know, I mean, that's where a lot of the distortions in our market happen. Government subsidies are to a very significant extent going for all the wrong things if we think about health of the planet and health of the people, right? I mean, a lot of it is subsidizing environmentally damaging production practices and crops and sectors. It's not driving the food system in the right direction. I think that's a very good starting point when I refer to the kind of architecture. But then I also think, I mean, as Jess has mentioned, you know, food companies we've had a kind of race to the bottom in the sense of cheaper, more available, you know, kind of it's a race to the bottom in terms of price. And that inevitably creates all of the incentives for, again, not investing in your land or doing, you know, it drives you towards a food system as well that is not the greatest in terms of delivering these multiple benefits that we need. So, you know, there's everyone along the chain has a role to play, you know, and the other thing that I'm particularly passionate about is, you know, this idea of price premium for sustainability. I think that's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, there should be there's a baseline that when you're buying a product, you know that, for example, there isn't illegal deforestation in it. So when you buy your steak, you shouldn't have to pay extra to have that guarantee that there's no slave labor and that there's no illegal deforestation in your steak. That is the responsibility of governments to regulate, and it's the responsibility of the private sector to be responsible on it. So I think, you know, that's the architecture side of things. We're not on the side of kind of telling people shift your diet. You know, I think the architecture needs to help make those sustainable choices, and then consumers do what they feel is appropriate.
I love everything you just said. And I think that the points about transparency and traceability are very important, but consumers should not have to pay, eaters should not have to pay more for that. We should have food that benefits both people and planet, as we've been saying throughout. Jonathan and Anna, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how you see the PTFI supporting communities particularly food producers, as they respond to not just the climate crisis, but other shocks? If there's another pandemic, if, you know, any kind of shock that could sort of come down the road. And maybe Anna, do you want to go first?
Probably Jonathan's better placed for that question. I can add on.
Jonathan, go ahead.
How does the PTFI affect the resilience of our food system?
You can phrase it like that. I was hoping we could talk about how it supports communities, particularly food producers and communities, to respond to shocks later down the road as it expands and evolves.
I think that nutrition and understanding the nutrition of what it is that we're eating right now has all kinds of human health benefits, just like has been pointed out so many times, but also from the standpoint of the farmers and the producers themselves and how we're getting the nutrition into that food. You know, if you're practicing good farming practices, ends up being really nicely correlated with nutrient composition of foods in a lot of cases. And we'll be able to document that a little bit more empirically. But inherently, if you're using a lot of agrochemicals and things like this on the foods that you're producing, that's hurting your farming community, that's hurting the resilience of the whole system, but it's also hurting all of the customers of that food as well. And so I don't know if I got to the point of your question there, but those are some of the ideas that kind of pass through my mind on that.
That was great. Thank you so much. Anna, anything to add?
Yeah, I think building on that, you know, the more that we know about what is in food, that, you know, building the evidence that's sort of inherent in diversity and in the vast varietal diversity that human beings have developed in every culture. You know, there's been over the past century or so a lot of homogenization of crops, and that is sort of, I think that part of the reason for that is that there's a lot of blind spots. You know, there's certain things that are considered helpful about homogenization that are economic and trade related. You know, I did some work, the first field work I ever did as a young student was in Mexico, participating in a study about why farmers grow certain varieties of maize. And everybody was saying that they were shifting because of the trade agreements with the United States that had just passed. And they were losing these varieties that had developed in specific niche, small areas in different parts of Mexico that were super well adapted because everyone was racing towards this homogenized system that would economically benefit. And they were losing recipes that were associated with these traditional varieties. And so the more we can get rid of these blind spots about what we're losing when we lose diversity and what we're gaining when we either hold on to it or increase it, this will help farmers. It'll help everybody. It'll help the resilience of the entire food system to make it clearer by the kind of evidence PTFI is generating and other work why diversity is so beneficial.
Yeah, thank you so much. Jess, that brings me sort of back to the data question. When we're monitoring food systems, what kind of metrics should we be looking at that we haven't been before? You know, if we want this new architecture of food systems, what do we need to be measuring and how do we need to be measuring it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of data gaps, and it gets back a bit to what Andy was saying. I mean, you ask anyone who's working in a certain discipline within food systems, and they'll talk forever about some of the data gaps. But I think when we look at a macro level, you know, obviously the periodic food table, Anna's work on the dietary quality, what people are eating around the world, a lot around Gary and Jonathan's work on agronomy and soils and seed systems. There's data gaps throughout, but I feel that we're really lacking the ability to understand how food systems adjust to shocks.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when the Ukraine-Russia crisis happened, we were a little bit sclerotic in understanding how the food system, the global food system, global food trade would respond. We caught up to it eventually, and then we were able to describe food inflation and increasing food prices and how there was choke points that were of different commodities, but it comes too late, you know, and it's happening now. We don't really understand the food situation in Gaza, you know, what food's coming in, what food's coming out, when can we declare famine? So we're very slow to respond to shock that keep hitting the system, whether it's extreme weather events, droughts, floods, cold snaps, hurricanes, you name it. Conflict, shifts in policy practices, you know, moving away from growing food for agriculture to biofuels and how the whole system responds to that. So we need more data in more short-term frames and in real time to really be able to respond to some of the massive inequities that can quickly follow from some of these big shocks that affect regions. So to me, I'm constantly frustrated with the lack of data as something global, regional, or even at the local level can impact food systems. Yeah, I mean, that's just one a macro example where it becomes difficult for us to be able to know how to respond.
Yeah, so that makes the PTFI all the more important. So my final question for all of you is, what do you want the folks who are listening and watching to keep in mind as they think about the periodic table of food initiative and how this research will continue to shape our food and agriculture systems? And maybe Andy, if I can start with you.
Oh, goodness me, you put me on the spot. I was thinking, oh, I hope they go to someone else. You are what you eat, right? I mean, it's the old, the old saying, right? And I think we are scratching on the surface of understanding the role of food in not just like filling our stomachs and feeling okay for another 6 hours, but in our health, in our mental health, in our physical health, in our cognitive capacity, in all of these things. And I just think I find it mind-blowing what food could do if we truly harness it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Gary.
Yeah, I'm saying that the opening up of getting past just amino acids and vitamins to this broader set of nutrients is so exciting for all of us. A lot of my current research is on aromatics and their influence on our physical, mental, and emotional health because of the fragrance of food being important, as every ethnic community I've worked with has told me, but seldom we're not taking that into account in terms of a health and well-being factor. And those are where the antioxidants are that protect us from certain kinds of stresses, lower our cortisol levels. So there's the language in the periodic table that's hidden is a language between plants and people that communicates to us whether we're healthy or not. We take in signals from the plants that we eat that tell us whether we're feeling better or feeling worse. And this is like decoding the language of food that has bearing on our health in a very real way. It's not just that plants communicate through mycorrhizae, they communicate through fragrance to their pollinators, predators, and to us as consumers.
So interesting. Thank you, Gary. Jonathan.
So we can measure things all day long, and I think that that's really important, and we need to have that data. But what's going to make it stick is to make it personal for people.
Yeah.
And ultimately, everybody needs to grow food. They need to experience this with all of their senses and with their heart. And that's going to make the periodic table of food initiative matter. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anna.
I think the periodic table of food initiative will really help to shift perspectives and paradigms about food, sort of paradoxically to something that is more simple and common sense about why diversity is important, just that we know diversity is important. But sometimes you'll hear things out of the nutrition community where nutrients have been such a focus along the lines of, you know, spinach is healthier than eggplant, or cucumbers aren't that healthy. And it always is like, well, that's such a, you know, narrow perspective on why we're looking at how something is healthy with missing what PTFI calls the dark matter of food and what's in there that's actually really affecting health, but not a nutrient as has been, you know, typically defined. So I hope that the initiative will just open up that perspective so that we're all more aware of the benefits of diversity.
Wonderful, thank you. Jess, I'll end with you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Gary that I think the real opportunity here is to look at the whole range of different chemicals, whether they're positive and negative, that make up the architecture of food. You know, I think nutrition is very at the tip of the iceberg of what we know. You know, the core macronutrients and the micronutrients. There's a whole host of chemicals, phytochemicals, and other things found in foods that's so important for flavor, texture, its whole structure. So to me, it opens up a whole new set of science in the nutrition field about really understanding what does it mean, why is food grown in certain ways, and what is in that architecture that has benefits for our health and the planet. So to me, it's opening up a Pandora's box of a quite ancient now science that hasn't really evolved a lot. We really need to go into the 21st century for nutrition. Speaking as a nutritionist, we're quite archaic in the way we think about the field. So I think the periodic food table really opens up a whole new area of science that can benefit society, much like the microbiome has done over the last decade. So, yeah.
It's such an exciting time for people involved in the food system, and we all have to remember that we are all part of the food system, whether you're a nutritionist, a farmer, or an eater. So I want to thank all of our panelists. This has been a really rich discussion. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Welcome back, everyone. If you could please take your seats. We're about to get started. Hey, everyone. Take your seats, please. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I hope you all have enjoyed the amazing lunch. Can we give it up for great performances and their entire service staff, please? That was wonderful. And all the farmers and farm workers who contributed to today's meal. Another round of applause, please. So we're going to get started very soon, but before we do, I'd like to invite Ismahan Elouafi back to the podium. She's the executive manager, managing director at CGIAR. Please give her a round of applause, everyone. Bigger round of applause.
Thank you very much, Dani. I wanted just to share with you, as I am listening today, this morning, I had two reflections that I really want to share with you. The first one is that the colleague, Jackie, Steve, and the colleagues told us we find about 21,000 biomolecules in about 500 food. That maybe covers about 30, 35 species. I don't know, but I'm guesstimating. So the idea is that what if we scan everything? What if we scan the 500,000 plant species? The 8 million animal species, how many biomolecules are gonna find? It's gonna be tremendous. And I think really I want this team to go with this group to go with the idea that we need to do it. And we could start with the gene banks. So the gene banks have been there for years. We have been using them for us at CGR, and everybody in the breeding knows how important they are. But let's imagine ourselves taking everything in the gene bank and outside in nature and find out about those biomolecules. The second idea I had, Dani, is that this is the beginning of a future without any NCDs. the non-communicable diseases. Ooh, thank you. Because the non-communicable diseases, we can stop them. We can stop them with the right food, the right lifestyle. And I think this information could really give us the tools and envision us to really work towards it. By 20 years, we should stop all NCDs, and that's going to save us not only lives, but a lot of money that we can use in other things. Thank you.
Bravo. Thank you so much. So, a reminder to think bigger and a reminder that we can imagine this future without NCDs, and I think that deserves another round of applause, everyone.